All right. Well, welcome everyone to MFM Presents How Musicians Work with Mastering Engineers, a Zoom webinar featuring myself, Adam Reifsteck, and Fred Kevorkian. So both Fred and I are mastering engineers. I run a record label, and Fred runs a mastering studio out of Avatar Studios. And we're here talking about all things mastering. So what is mastering? How musicians can effectively prepare their mixes for mastering and best practices, as well as some real world insights from both independent and major label projects. And this event is produced by MFM President and saxophonist Sohrab Saadat Ladjevardi. And so this event is designed for musicians, producers, audio engineers, anyone really that's interested in demystifying the mastering process and learning how to get the most out of their professional relationships in the studio. So with that, I'll welcome Fred, and maybe you could fill us in a little bit on your background and kind of your approach to mastering and your collaborative approach with musicians.
All right. Okay.
Sorry,
Oh,
Fred,
okay.
before you start, may
Yeah.
I say something? The reason why I produced this event, because I know Adam as my mastering maestro and Fred as well. So with these two gentlemen, I mastered this CD with Fred. This is with Adam. Another one with Adam. And this one as well. So I was drinking sake, and then I got this, I was thinking about the next recording and then mastering and so, and then somehow Fred came in mind. And then I talked with Mark, who's also attending, who's my dear friend, also Sosala, guitarist member, and he also mastered with Fred. So everything came together. And the reason why I know Fred is when I did this CD, which he mastered, the producer, sound engineer, and recording engineer was Martin Bisi. And he has been working, still works a lot with Fred. And I know also Mark C through Martin Bisi, because when I did the 1903 CD, somehow, I think he referred me to Mark, and I invited him to the session. So that's the big story of mastering. And I think both did a really good job. And I thought mastering should be also kind of in the field of making music, because it's the final work of a recording, you know. So they're actually very important, but they're always in the shadows and not really much mentioned at the Grammys and so. So that's why I got these together. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. All right. So Adam, I just want to do one correction. I'm not at Avatar anymore.
Oh, I thought you were, sorry.
Since they got bought by Berkeley,
Mhm.
I mean, I stayed there. There was like a little transition time, but then now I'm in Brooklyn. So
Okay.
just to be clear. But before, yeah, I mean, my background, basically, I grew up in France. I did some electronic studies there. I always wanted to be in the equipment industry mostly, and I love music, but I was in my mind I was going to be a equipment designer or something. You know, I was like trying to get a job in an electronic field, but with the music, when I was starting to do some tech work in studios and wiring studios, I really felt like this was, you know, an opportunity for me to put everything together, and I hope to become a recording engineer. And little by little I started, you know, working in studios. Um, I did a little time in LA. I went 3 years in LA. I mean, sorry, 1 year in LA, come back 3 years in France, around mid 80s, and then late 80s, early 90s, I came to New York, and I'm still here. So I've been lucky that way. I found a job at Sear Sound, a recording studio for 9 years. I was there about 9 years, and halfway through, I decided to go more into the mastering. So halfway through the 9 years, I specialized in mastering. And after that, I went to Absolute Audio, a studio that was doing only mastering. I stayed there 5 years. Then I moved out and went to Avatar Power Station for 13 years. I rent a room there. I worked on my own. It was my own company, but I rent a room in the building, which was great because I saw a lot of engineers, musicians that I know from the past. It's always fun to be surrounded by a good energy. And when they got bought by Berkeley, I think it was around 2018. I still was there for a year, and then I built my room here in Brooklyn, basically.
Yeah, so I'm curious because because you've been mastering a lot longer than I have, and I've been brought up completely inside the box. So I'm curious on how has your mastering philosophy has evolved over the years with that shift from the analog to digital formats.
Okay. Well, the gear I use is pretty much. But when I arrived at Absolute Audio, which was my first real mastering studio, like before it was me putting together stuff, inventing things, trying to provide um, a service, but I've never been in a mastering studio. But I knew because recordable CDs were available, we designed systems to be able to do mastering as an independent. But it was not. I mean, I went by with it, but I don't know if it was the right way to do it. People were happy, but it was with what I had at Sear Sound. I put together some gears. And then I went to Absolute, which was like that was the real studio, and I learned a lot more about mastering than I knew before. And basically, the gear I have here is almost like 70% of one of the room that I bought when I left there. So I have pretty much the same. The past 20 years, I'm basically using the same gear, the same analog chain. And what changed mostly, because in the 2000 to 2005 that I was there, the plugins started to come in, but it was mostly you do it all out, and then you maybe got a limiter in the computer, but it wasn't as heavy processing in the computer than it is now. So basically, this is what I changed. Like I'm using more the outboard gear to give a tone, to give like a sound to it. Of course, compression is very important, EQ, the main things. But as soon as there is some issues, technical issues, like if I need to bring the vocal up, I used to do with EQ in the middle channel. Now I can do it in the computer with some intelligent software, and that I've been combining both, like the high tech, let's say, and the old school. I have like a lot of tubes, a lot of analog gear. They're serial number 1, serial number 2. It's really it's really great. But that's what changed the most is the back end of it, and I feel like it really changed the game now, really.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the challenges that I've kind of I'm an interesting situation because I run a record label, and so I tend to be take on mastering projects usually out of necessity for my artists that I'm releasing out on the label. So I primarily work in the electronic music realm, and I do take on some other projects in other genres. But you kind of run the gambit in terms of the types of projects that you work on, from White Stripes to, you know, Willie Nelson, Iggy Pop, and Dave Matthews Band, and sort of running all different styles. How would you kind of say you sort of approach the mastering process? Because for me, I'm usually involved from the beginning to the end, whereas you come in at the late stage of the
Right.
project. So curious on your working relationships with the musicians.
I mean, sometimes it's a brand new project. Sometimes I work, you know, like Sohrab was saying before, like he knew me from Martin, BC. That's how, you know, we met first. And Martin's still working. He's still sending me clients. So basically, it could be older clients that I already worked with in the past, but even newer clients. If let's say if a band likes Martin to be the producer, they like what he's done in the past. Most likely, I was in the package with it, you know. So, and it happens a lot. I have a lot of friends now, because it's been over 20 years we've been working together, producer slash engineer, who they say, for example, okay, I'll record your album, but you know, Fred is usually the guy who's doing the mastering, been working with him for a long time, so that's part of the sound. And you know, it's not like a condition, but most likely if they don't have anybody that they can use, that they have in mind specifically, most of the time they don't, then I end up you know, doing the back end of the project. And the great thing is, like, these people who I work with for so long, they know exactly what I can do, what I cannot do, so they let the space for me to do that, you know. And because sometimes, you know, so I mean, I work a certain way, you know, every mastering engineer works a certain way. Sometimes if there is a tick, an engineer will say, well, it's not my problem, just fix it in the mix, you know. And you know, I do a lot more here than I should, but I try to do a lot, and they know I can't do it, and they say, well, Fred will fix it, don't worry, or let give some headroom for Fred, he needs that to do this. So I think that I'm sorry, the relationship is very important if you have somebody that knows your work, and the way your equipment as well, and the way you work. But I get a lot of new clients, and it's basically um, it's good to talk then, you know. That's why I like to have a conversation over the phone if it's a new client, because you can always say how much it is, what do you do, what do you know. I like to talk, understand a little bit the direction, but it's very hard with word to express, you know, especially musicians. They don't have the technical sense of the vocabulary, so they're, you know, sometimes they're not very they don't feel at
Expressive.
ease to express. Correct. Yeah. So
Well, I can confirm that, because when I went with Martin in Fred's studio and he started with track this and that, every time when I wanted to comment to it, Martin just said, shut up, let me talk. Because he worried if it's going too long, then the budget wouldn't, you know. So how was it with you, Mark, when you worked with Fred? Was Martin with you all the time? Or did you work with?
We mostly worked with Fred when we were recorded at my studio. So I'm not sure. Maybe Fred can answer this. Hi, Fred, by the way.
Hey, how are you, Mark?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I don't know if you did Live Skull Records back in the 80s.
No,
no.
not the 80s.
No,
No.
we started with the Martin BC compilation for his
Right.
35th anniversary, where we had one track on that.
Okay.
Right. Right.
Our first record that once we reformed, which I have here, I could show you. We have this,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we also did our second one. Now, both of those were and our newest one, I don't have a copy right here, but we recorded them at my studio at Deep Sea Studio in Hoboken. And the second one we did with you, Dangerous Visions, had the BBC Live Skull Live in the BBC from the 80s. So it was two projects in a way on one record. And I mean, Fred was very open to me. I got to sit there for the sessions, basically. And it was for that second one, it was a big deal to try to make them to give them some kind of integral sound so that they related to each other. Two different bands, 30 years apart, except for me and Rich, the drummer. You know, we were the only same members, and one was recorded live in London, the other one was recorded in my studio. But it turns out that yeah, it really worked, and it was very successful for us. So that actually, I will say that yes, I'm not that knowledgeable about mastering, but it was fun to sit there with Fred and kind of at least tell him aesthetically how things I wanted to go, and you know, we're very happy with the work, and I love the analog gear. It's certainly fun. You know, before I worked with Fred, we did these Live Skull reissues at the Magic Shop. They had downstairs a mastering setup, and they're specialized in old, like, analog recordings way past their time, you know, tapes that barely played and things like that. And they were really helpful with that material because, you know, it was very fragile and on all kinds of formats and stuff. But as far as the new records, yeah, I really think that the mastering, it really brought the mixes into the zone of all music. That's what I like about it. You know, you could play it after anything, classic rock to punk rock to anything, and it stands up. And I think that was definitely the addition of the mastering, of really carefully tailoring it so that, you know, the guitars were loud, but you could hear the vocals, and there was still plenty of bass and drums. You know, that's a tricky thing when you're mixing, and try to get it as close as possible. And you know, the same with us. We're in my studio. I mean, it's a computer-based system, but we're also using more and more plugins to try to help that. But I still haven't used any automatic things like automatic vocal levelers or whatever those things are. And I am very curious about the new mastering tools, because I will talk to musicians who don't even get their work mastered anymore. They have some kind of program that they just feed it in. And, you know, if they're on a super budget, do that. But I don't know, what are those programs like? I'm curious. Have you looked at any of those, Adam or Fred?
I never used one. I heard people talking about these, and I would say, you know, if people are making maybe a single and they're not really that critical about the result, they just want to be in the ballpark. Like, if somebody makes music like more like a product and then move on into another one and another one just for a minute, or put it on TikTok, put it on this, I'm sure it's fine. You know, I mean, again, there is this kind of work for everybody, every type. You know, there's the super picky person that would go and remix as soon as, you know, you change something, and some people don't even really care that much. They're like, okay, it's bright enough, it's loud enough, let's put it out, boom, you know, let's move on to something else. So I feel like those are automatic. They, of course, they're gonna get better and better, but I don't know if, like, there's a lot of, it's funny because I have a lot of attended session, and the past few weeks I've done a lot of big records, like, I mean, long records, 13 songs, 14 songs, you know, like that, which is rare nowadays. But, and I always, you know, I hear, or sometimes we discuss with the client in the back, they're like, see what Fred is doing here. You'll never get this there in the you know, in the online stuff that you feed, because we were dealing with little things, you know, moving a little bit here and there to make it feel better, or there's a little noise there. Is it part of the sound? Is it distracting? Stuff like that, you know. It's really it's custom, basically, you know. You have to, but does it matter for a lot of people? Sometimes it does not matter if you know, if you're not that critical about the result, and you move on quick to something else, like, you know, disposable music kind of thing, you know.
You know, when we did these remastering of the early Lifestyle records at the Magic Shop, I really fell in love with their analog gear, and
Yeah.
it reminded when as soon as I walked into your studio, I saw very similar.
Yeah.
I mean the remastered Lifestyle records sound 100 times better than the original.
Right.
And it's due to that careful, you know, individual treatment.
Right. And there is more, you know, there is more, like the time goes, like I've seen some records of remastering some records done in the 90s, for example, and they sounded good, you know, but the vibe was different. In the 2000 is the same thing. It was like very edgy, very loud, very like nowadays everything's really warm and big and fat, you know, so it changes. So if you know, you remaster something for the nowadays, it's going to be different. And like the stuff from the 80s, for example, were a lot thinner than what we have nowadays, because of the technology and how people listen to music as well. They probably had better stereos at home, but in general, you know, it was vinyl in the 80s, so they didn't want too much low frequency, so you can pack more music. So everything below, you know, let's say 40 was cut, or you didn't have that sub stuff like that you get now that you can play with. That's an extra, it's an extra level of excitement that, and it's hard to reproduce that. But when you have a good system and you have a good recording with all that infra low end, it makes a difference, you know. So you sometimes when you remaster in a different generation, it'll sound better because it fits better the time, you know.
Well, I remember being disappointed at the time. I mean, really, I think one thing also was the pressings. I don't know, you know, some of the pressings. People are really careful now about pressing records. You would think it would get worse, but I've been very happy with pressings recently.
Okay, I mean, if you go to a good place or
Yeah.
a distant place, because there's, I
People
think,
are obsessive about it now. You know, it's like a boutique, like fine art for them. Pressing.
Yeah, some of it is, but some is just it's just putting out as many records as possible because it's such a popular format. It's the only physical format that stands, you know, and that you can sell actually. But the thing is, a lot of people don't have the ability to listen to a good test pressing if the test pressing is good or not. So that gives the company who presses quickly those things, you know, they're like, you know, we'll see. And then people have like a stupid little turntable, you know, and they don't know what to expect. And they're like, yeah, it sounds okay. But when they send me test pressing, I listen, I A/B with the session. I have a good turntable. And, you know, I A/B, I line up the levels and I compare A/B each song. Especially the first track should be the best sounding track. You know, as you go in, it deteriorates. But I reject a few, and then when you start doing that, people are like, oh, what do you mean? No, we're not cutting again. We don't. They get mad. It used to be all the time, you know. So I don't know. I think you're right that there is more. I know a lot of places where they're passionate by that, you know, and they're really doing it the best they can. But there's also the other ways, like how many more can we do? How many, you know, can we pack in? Because That's what it is.
You know, the other night I was talking to Eugene from Gogol Bordello, and he has a new record label, and they had like a show where they wanted to have the record for sale, and he went somewhere where they pressed and printed the covers in a week and had them back to him, and
Wow.
but the results were not that great.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're talking about. There's places you can go and they'll do it, but it's just it's like fast food.
Yeah, because it takes time. It's an art to cut well, to cut loud, and not over de-essed and not over, because you can cut, but the result, if you want to have a loud record and has as much brightness as possible and keep the low end and all that stuff, it's an art. That's why people, they have to be experienced to use. I mean, there is some automatic cutting that pretty much they do an okay job, but when the program is a little complex, they over de-ess, they cut too low to be safe.
What
And
is the
it
meaning
sounds
of
fine. You
over
play,
DS?
And
Yeah.
just one question: what do you think is the maximum per side for if you really want your recording to sound good for a vinyl?
Oh, it depends on the program, really.
Right.
Yeah, depends.
For a rock band with
A rock band, I would say like 20, 22. I mean, it sounds good. I've had stuff at 22 minutes. It sounds good. There's no, but of course, if you do 18, it will sound better. You could put more bottom. You can just get a little louder as well. It's really proportional and depends on how much bass you have. If the program doesn't have too much bass, you can cut louder. It's not like you cannot cut bass. It's just like bass takes more space. That's all. The high frequency is more of a problem. If it's super bright, that's a problem. Then they have to de-ess it as they cut it. That's more problematic. The low frequencies are not a problem as long as they're mono, and that's what they do. They mono the low. I provide mono mastered for cutting, so that way I don't have to hear about, I can't cut it, I can't do this. Depending on the music, but usually 150 hertz mono the bottom, so that helps them to cut it easily. But that's low frequencies are fine as long as you don't need too much space. The more bottom you have, the more space it's going to take. But 20, 22, it's a good length. After that,
you're fine with it.
Yeah.
Brett, what do you mean with DS?
Oh, DS is a high frequency limiter.
Oh,
It's like it's usually was used for de-essing vocal, the S's on the vocal.
yes,
When people sing,
yes.
some people have more. So there is a compressor that's only compress the S frequencies, which is usually 7K and up or something like that. Used to be a Neumann, on the Neumann lathe. They have, it's called the accelerator limiter, and that protects the cutter head to get too much high frequency. But you can use it for cymbals. You can use it. It's called a de-esser, but you can use it on any high frequency program, like cymbals and tambourines and like stuff that's too bright. It softens it up. It's a compressor, but acts only on that frequency band that you choose, and like a one band multi-band. Yeah.
Yeah, and then in terms of like what Fred was saying with the end, where the end result, where you're putting out the record, largely depends on what these automated tools that are available. I know in my line of work with DJs and producers, they'll go out and play their new record in the club, and they're like, it just sounds like crap. But they're using all the same tools that I use, but they don't have the experience to what it's going to sound like on big systems. So
Right.
So a lot of times I think that's where the trade-off is you can use some of these automated tools, but depending on where the end result's going to go, is it largely depends on, it is worth kind of getting the mastering engineer involved in that. And I do the more, and it sounds like Fred kind of has a similar approach where we kind of have, sort of a collaborative approach with who's running the project, or whether it's the artist, if it's an indie project, or if it's the producer with a bigger project. So we kind of have those conversations with them, where the end results, if it's going to go to a pressing for vinyl or something like that. So yeah, so that kind of really dictates it. I mean, if you're just releasing it, on Spotify, and it's like going to have a shelf life of 2 weeks, and I'd say
Yeah.
go for the automated tools. So
Yeah.
so I guess my question, I guess, for you is, can you maybe walk us? I mean, we were talking about this, Fred, on our meeting before, trying to maybe get a sense of walking us through the workflow for mastering it, because a lot of musicians kind of see us as a dark art,
Right.
So
Yeah.
So maybe kind of, obviously every project is different, and we can't really sort of narrow down to one specific workflow, but is there kind of like a common thread in terms of the projects that you're working with?
Including the contact with the client and all that, or just the okay. So I usually, first of all, I want to know what if they're happy with their mixes. Let's say if somebody comes from nowhere, I don't even know who mixed it, or I want to make sure they're happy with their mixes, and or if they have something in mind that could have been better. And they, sometimes like, oh, the mixing engineer doesn't have time, he moved on another project, but I wish the vocal was louder, or I wish. So I tell people, like, always, like, it's limited what I can do in the mastering, but like we talked a little bit before about certain modern tools, there is a lot more I can do too, that some people don't even think, that it's possible. So I try to get a sense of, like, what they like. Also, some people tell me, like, oh, you know what, you don't need to make it super loud, we like it dynamic, we like it organic, we don't want it super processed, it doesn't have to compete, or okay. So that's, then I get the vibe there. Or the other extreme will be like, it's gotta stick out, it's gotta pop, it's gotta be, in your face, blah blah blah. Okay. So that doesn't it doesn't always mean it's possible to do that, but that's what they want, that's what their goal is. And then I get a vibe. I'm like, if the person's like, we don't need to go stupid loud, and we want to keep the dynamic, and we want to be pleasant, not fatiguing, then I know I don't have to push things too much. I just make the track sounds the best as possible, and I'll know I'm not going to be stressing about, I get an extra dB, and for what, really? It's at this point in the game, it's not really that necessary anymore. But basically, I that's what I like, is have an understanding. If they come in, or even if they send me the files, like, we have a discussion, and I sometimes it's very clear, I know exactly, and I listen to the mixes. I'm like, I know what you're saying, sounds good, maybe this, maybe that. They're like, yes, you're right. We discuss a little bit. I can say, I heard the mixes, if it feels a little thin overall, yes, they'd be like, yes, exactly. So I know we're on the same page. Otherwise, I'll try to understand, and if I feel like I'm not sure about what I want to do, I'll do one track, make sure I'm going in the right direction, because I don't want to waste anybody's time and do a whole album and then going the wrong way, and have to undo everything, redo it, and then you become a billing problem. It's like, do I charge twice? So I want to make sure that from the beginning I feel comfortable, I know what to do, and once that's established, then it's easy. Then the process of mastering becomes more like a natural for me. I don't think about, like, oh, I'm gonna do this because they like it that way. Like it's already there. I know what to do. You know, it's not like I'm walking on eggshells. So once I have the mixes, I usually play them from Pro Tools computer, who's only the Pro Tools only is the playback, so it just plays the file and stops the file from that, and it goes right back to analog, where it goes through a whole bunch of analog gear, EQ, compressors, de-essers, and then it's captured in a different computer where it's going to be finished there, as far as like editing and more processing and the final leveling on the bus. But the main EQ and compression is done with analog, and each track has a sheet of paper which I recall all my settings, so I can go back to it. So I write all my settings. It takes about a minute. It's not very long, and everything's stepped. Pretty much everything is stepped. I have a few things that are not, but everything has a step dented knob, so everything is like 0.5 or 1 or 1.5. I know it's easy to recall. So that's how like 80% of the sound is done with the analog gear. Then once it's captured in the computer, I have the ability to do multi-band, to do, like I mentioned before, like raise the vocal a little bit, lower the vocal maybe, or the bass guitar with some more intelligent plugins. Of course, some cleaning up noise, hum, buzzers, you name it. It's all done. That's done all in the computer. And basically, in my case, that's not like most people do, but I like to use tape. So once everything is aligned in the computer, let's say if it's an album or an EP, we have a few songs, they're already all like in the sequence. Then I run a pass to tape, I record to analog tape, and back to the computer again, and capture that new file, which is exactly what's, with all the edits that I have, but with the tape version, with the tape sound to it. And the tape machine is a analog half-inch 15 IPS all tube machine. So it has a nice coloration, but not too much. And I don't hit the tape too hard, but that's kind of the additional service that I provide that not too many people provide, because it takes time. It's a little time consuming, and so there is extra editing, actually sometimes a lot more editing. But the reason I do that is because I realize a lot of people pick the tape a lot of times. So I figured, it's a nice thing to do, because it's popular. People like it. And I think, maybe we talked about this in the last discussion. Maybe like 10% of people like the tape because they think it's cool, and they took the video. It's a nice tape machine. It looks great. It's an old, very old tape machine, but it sounds really good. And but really, it is a plus to have. So the flow is, for me, it's like playing the file, going through the analog gear, capturing in the computer, doing additional edits, or plug-in related processing in there. And then before going out, if it's a single or an EP, an album, before being completely processed with the level at the end, I do a tape transfer, which I capture in a real time back in the computer, and I have the two files lined up. I do duplicate everything exactly the same, and I spit out two versions. If it's an album, it'll be one album with tape, one album without tape, and singles the same, anything. So it really gives an alternate choice to the client, which it's a good thing. I think everybody appreciates, and If they don't pick the tape, that's fine with me. It's good, you know. At least they heard it, they know what it's doing, and I don't think too many people, you know, give that service, and I think that's a good thing for me, you know.
Cool. Well, I want to dive into this question that we had in the chat, which kind of segues into where I was thinking of going with the conversation anyway, is how do musicians prepare their mixes for mastering? What do you tell your clients? Because for me, I kind of tell, you know, give them a certain headroom, you know, -6 dB, you know, kind of and making sure that, especially in my world with electronic music, make sure you have turned everything off the master bus before you send me the mix. But I'm curious because we have a little PDF that you put together we can share with everybody here. I'll put it in the chat here. 5 tips to be super prepared for mastering. So
Yeah.
So maybe if you can dive in a little bit, what you would recommend for musicians on how to get their mixes ready for that final you know, secret sauce that we do.
Yeah. You know, I, like you said, like some headroom is good. I mean, sometimes what I tell people mostly is that it can go to the it can peak in the red. Sometimes it's okay if it's a peak, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be super low, but like the one thing I really tell them is like if you have a mix with a limiter for the artist, because sometimes the mixer puts a limiter for the artist to hear the mixers in more like a real world level, so they can appreciate, compare, you know. That's the thing. But then when they send me the mix, they send me without the limiter. So I have one, it's like it says reference, listening reference, and then for for mastering. So that's usually how it's presented, and it's fairly simple. Some people don't know. They ask me, when they ask me, I said, look, if you have a favorite compressor that you like, you put it on the bus. I don't mind any processing. Like if you think it makes the sound of your record closer to what you like, just do it, as long as you know you like what it's doing, especially dynamic processing like a compressor. Even a limiter could be used as a texture more than just pushing things brick wall limiting, you know. It could be used nicely to give some certain character, which I like, because the closer we get to the project, to the end project before mastering, the easier it's going to be, you know, for me. But it's also, you know, that you have to let them know that you have to like what you hear really, and it's harder to undo if you use too much processing. So for me, it's like, you know, if you see the red light once in a while and you don't hear distortion, I'm okay. It doesn't have to be super low or whatever, but don't use a limiter. Don't kill the transients, because in my world of analog, it works so much better when things are dynamic and in peaks, because you can, you know, you can have a slow compressor, a fast compressor, a de-esser, all they work together for different things. If everything's limited as like it is at the very end, it's complicated. And this morning I had a single. Really, it's funny because I never do that, but I tried, I listened, I'm like, nope, I put it right in the computer and I worked in the box, which I really, really never do. It sounded great. That's why, you know, I didn't feel like it would help to go to analog. But I went to tape, though. I took it down. I went to tape back in there, and I think it sounds better with tape again. But to be prepared for mastering, I think, you know, you need to be well organized, and trying to have a consistency if it's an album. And I know it's not always simple, because different mixers are taking care of the mixing, different studios, and it comes from all over the place. It's not that simple sometimes, but if you can get as consistent as possible, when you, let's say, when the track is mixed and you go to mix another track, just reference to that one, so it's not day and night, so it's always nice to have a consistency, because otherwise you're like, if we have to make things brighter suddenly because everything, like the drums are dull and we need to bring the brightness on the drums, or the vocals too loud, everything changes. The balance are changing so much that's when you see, when I get like experienced engineer and they all do the whole album, the whole thing in one place, it's sometimes just amazing. Even the gain is the same on the settings, and maybe depending on the tune, maybe that bass is a little boomier, but everything is very consistent on my end too, so it's easy that way. Other than that, sometimes it could be different sample rate and stuff like that. I don't mind. I'll just open a different session. I don't like people to process too much stuff, even if they have, like, let's say, 88 to 96K, 48. They don't need to put everything in one sample rate, because sometimes that's where a problem happens, when they don't know how to do it. Suddenly it becomes a 16-bit file, or an MP3 that they forgot to switch the button. And so I don't care about that. And mostly it's the limiting, like you mentioned, some headroom is good for sure, but the limiting is because sometimes you have headroom but it's pinned, it's like pinned at -3. I'm like, yeah, but that's the same thing. You don't take down the level after the limiting, it doesn't change anything. So but when you speak with somebody on the phone, you understand what level of technical knowledge they have, and that's it. And yeah, in that little like PDF stuff, it's been a while, it's a few years back, but I think it's still relevant, a lot of it. It's probably, yeah, it's a few days, a few years ago, so it might not be all like appropriate for today's exact, with all the plugins we have. But in general, yeah, it's probably still good to use as a guide. I remember I spent a lot of time on that thing, so it should be okay. Yeah, I don't mind, even, like, I don't mind 16-bit files sometimes. It's not a problem. I think it's all good. If it sounds good, that's all that matters, really. Sometimes people can't find the 24-bit, and it's a drama, but, like, let's see how it sounds, and usually it's fine. Sample rate's the same thing. I don't need super high res stuff. To me, it doesn't make much of a difference, to be honest. Two channels, when you work with two channels, the end of it's not like you have hundreds of processing going on at high, at sample rates. And that's better to have when you do mixing, as opposed to have bigger files, and sample rate with the high resolution for the plugins. But then you need the power on the computer. On two channels, I think the difference is not as important. It's more important to sound good. To have a good mix is way better than having a 24-bit or 16-bit mix. That, to me, that's not an issue.
Fred, I have a question for you. We at my studio, we record directly to computer, and it's all in the computer.
Right.
Do you have an opinion on analog summing? There's all these boxes now you can sum. I mean,
right.
A little bit, but
Right. Well, I was an engineer mixing. I did mixes. I wasn't mixing engineer, but I did recording, mixing. But I never had the opportunity to mix with Pro Tools or any of these. So I don't know personally. What I hear is that it makes a difference when you sum certain things in analog instead of everything in the box. It sounds wider, more open. And I think, I mean, it makes sense. There's less processing, there's less stuff. And analog always make things breathe, even if you don't do much, just going through. If it's a good quality console or summing box, you know, like there are. I can't, but I can't tell you for myself. I heard from people, but the thing is now, um, it's another layer of analog, which means like recalls are not as fast when you do it like that. So maybe plugins and computers are getting better, faster. They are able to manipulate data a better way.
Uh-huh.
So I know people always complain. They're like, yeah, it's great, but you know, when I need a recall, I can do it in the plane. I can do it in the hotel room with the headphones. I type the, you know, on the laptop, whatever. And I
Yeah.
think that's the key now. It's like how quick you can.
Yeah.
I can't do it because I have all this gear. So I have to be in the studio to recall my mastering. There's no other ways, but you know, that's the way it is. I mean, that's what I choose that. Like some people mix on console still,
Yeah.
they choose that. And if you need a recall, well, you gotta wait, you know, and and maybe it's not quite exactly the same, especially mixing. There's so many things going on a console. The mastering is usually good. I can get extremely close, yeah. So I don't I'm sorry, I can't really tell you for sure, but what I heard is
Right.
when you use when you sum certain things, the stems, let's say, you know, stereo stems, through a console or through a special summing box, analog, well made, it's probably it will probably sound better. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
Adam, did we cover Peter Gordon's question?
Yeah, I think so. And then maybe on the subject of preparing your mixes, so it was the relationship between VU and LUFS and determining the final output in our streaming environment. So like yeah, I don't know, what are you thinking about? Are you doing different you know, masters for streaming versus putting it out? Because in my line of work, mainly getting the loudness for the clubs. Sometimes, depending on the record, I might do a different master for streaming, but
Yeah.
most of the time it's the same master, you know. They're going to turn it, Spotify's going to turn it down anyway, you know. So it's like you don't really have control over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really use LUFS meter. I had one when I was when I was moving in between rooms. I had shared this room before I did it this way. This guy Alex was with me, had the TC Electronic you know, meter, standalone meter, which was great. It's a great meter, but I don't. And then you could see the LUFS and all that stuff. That's why I was playing Spotify stuff through it, and then make sure that you know, I would start it at 0 and then go throughout the whole song, and at the end it will be 14.0, you know, minus 4. I'm like, okay, they did good, you know, because sometimes there was the time where people were like, how come my stuff is louder and softer, even on Spotify? And so I was trying to figure out if they really do it that way, and they do. My when he comes out of here, no, I don't look at the LUFS. It's they're gonna turn it down, like you said, but the one difference is like I don't push it. I don't push the music the way we used to do it, like, you know, 10, 15 years ago, where downloads were important and CDs were important, and when people downloaded on their iPod and make a music list, um, you know, it would be downloading the way it was mastered. So if you master it loud, your track will come loud after whatever. So that was an issue. Nowadays, I feel like, you know, it's loud. It's probably a dB or two less than it was, or you know, about than it was 10 years ago, I would say. But the music, the style of music, it's like doing hip hop with no limiters. There's no way, even if it has to be minus 20 dB, you have to, you know what I mean? It's part of the sound, compression, limiting, even clipping. Clipping is, I mean, you are electronic music, you guys use a lot of clipping. Yeah. And it's a big part of it. And where you put it, before, after, which one. I do clip already my converters, so I don't use it in the limiter at the end. But in the early days before we had plugins, it was all about clipping and compressing and limiting here and there an analog word and capturing it as loud as possible. And certain type of music you can get away with, even like getting a little gain above zero in the computer. If it's a lot of punch and beat oriented, it will be okay. If you have a lot of piano stuff, like it might, vocal, even distorted guitar, it's not that simple. Even if it's all distorted, you hear it right away. It's always something that's funny about that. It's like the biggest distorted guitar. If you clip it, you hear it like it's nasty. It's really strange. Not strange, but But yeah, I would say I don't really pay attention. I have my VU meters. That's my main thing on the side. I have peak meters. I have the one in the computer, and that's about it. Like really, like I open the LUFS meter maybe once a week, just because somebody pointed out something, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me see what's, But I don't. It's not really relevant for me.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is with the technology too. I mean, like the software won't let you, like before, in the analog days, it would, you would be clipping and you distort. But now, like the software is kind of built to where you can't almost do that.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, even the hardware, they have
Yeah.
soft peak. I mean, they had this. I remember the soft clip. It wasn't new, but now they have a more like it's more efficient. You don't hear it, and you can hit it harder. But I don't know. It's just something that especially because, as I said before, like we don't need to push things super loud. We don't have to gain like half a dB or dB here, and it's just so much easier. Things are, before was stressful because it's like, oh, how am I gonna get an extra here, and then a lot of the clients didn't understand that you don't make a record loud in the mastering. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you can make it louder if it comes down, at a certain level, but it's really the choice. It's the production. It's the choice of sound. It's about phase. It's about punch. It's about all that stuff. And if it's a well-produced program, you can make it louder easily, and you probably make it too loud, and you want to turn it down. But it's really amazing how production and understanding sound makes a difference at the end. How something can sound, just like a band that plays tight will sound louder than a sloppy band with untuned drums, and it's just the fact. When everything hits together, it hits.
I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yeah.
I master my own recordings, and I use Isotope software. And I was wondering if there's I'd heard that there's a different process from mastering for like CD and digital download as opposed to mastering for vinyl. Now, supposing I attempted to master my recording to release it on vinyl, how should I approach that?
Okay. Adam, you wanna take a shot at this?
Yeah, I would say find someone that knows how to master for vinyl. I do not, so I send all my stuff out.
You're sending it to Fred, huh?
Yeah, or something
No,
else, you know,
it,
for the vinyl pressing. For me, I'm doing mostly, you know, club stuff, so we're not doing
right,
pressing to vinyl.
right,
So they're just like DJs are playing the stuff out. So
right.
and most of the records are you know, on streaming services. So we do, on a rare occasion, we'll do a different version for streaming, but most of the time, like we were saying earlier, we kind of leave it up to the, you know, they're
Right.
going to turn it down anyway on the streaming services. But
Right.
vinyl is a completely different thing. So I don't know, Fred, do you work in vinyl much?
Yeah, I do, and yeah, most of my album they end up on vinyl because that's the only physical product that people can sell at the show now, because the CDs and nobody really cares. But as far as the mastering, the first pass, when I mentioned like I'm doing through the analog gear and capturing it in the computer, that's consistent with for both. Once I have that pre-master, like 80% mastered track in the computer, I'll do some of the edits. I'll keep the same, but then at the very end, I give myself, you know, two different direction. One will be for digital CD streaming, and then the other direction will be for vinyl, which is not a very different. It will not be a very different um, master, but there's a what I learned through the years is I have to I have to prepare what normally the cutting engineer would do, like the monoing the low frequency, keeping the high frequency in check. Um, you know, if there's extreme low end, uh, maybe just tame that a little bit so there's more room. If it's a long side, you just keep it a little in check as well. It's more like little detail, and then the overall level at the end is not going to be pushed as much. And I'm let's say when I capture in my computer, it's already decent level. I usually put 2 dB on top of what I have for the digital, the CD, and the streaming. And for the vinyl, I usually keep it like 0.5. You know, that's about a dB and a half less, depending on the project. Obviously, sometimes you want that limiting, but for the sound more than for the level, um, I feel like on the vinyl it sounds better when there's more headroom and there's no more, you know, you don't really have to compete like, well, my record's louder on this, on that. You know, it's a vinyl, people play it, they turn the volume, and that's it. So I feel like basically, you know, obviously I don't charge the client 2 masters. You know, it's an additional vinyl masters, which is a global price for the album. You know, to give you an example, like an album, you know, if I say like the mastering, the vinyl masters will be $200 for the whole thing extra. That's it, because the extra work, there's a document that we have to take notes of all the in and out of the tracks. So basically it's not like a whole new, you know, a complete different process. It takes basically the same capture, and then you go to a little bit of a different direction.
Okay, that's great. I do have another question, if I may. Yeah, I use a lot of I do a lot of solo performances where I play backing tracks, loops, samples, and stuff on my laptop while I'm playing my music live and soloing my brains out and doing whatever. How would I approach mastering those tracks for, you know, for use in a live situation?
Oh, I mean, you mean loops like electronic sound mostly, or is it like
Yeah.
Well, just make sure, I think, make sure they're balanced. I mean, if you do mastering, your own, you have an idea already. So make sure they're consistent, especially if you're on stage, you want them to come at, you don't have to change level every time. So make sure that or back, all your background music have the same tone as level, so when they come one after another, you don't have to tweak the level. That's, to me, that seems to be like the most critical thing. And if there's a lot of dynamic, maybe reduce a little bit the dynamic, but if they're loops already, it's probably all already contained. But make sure the EQ, the overall level feels the same for the same type of loops and sounds. So that way you don't have to worry about it while you perform,
Thank you.
I don't think there is anything special. Like, I don't think you have to over limit it or over compress it. Just make it, because your performance, I don't know exactly how it is, but uh, just let it do his thing. The music shouldn't be overly like saturated or compressed for whatever reason. Just let it be. If it's and make sure it's consistent through every track, so you don't have to worry about this one coming too loud, then you have to adjust your mic or your amp, or yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, and thanks. Before thanks for all of this great information you're sharing with us. This is an educational experience.
I hope it helps. I mean, it's I'm passionate, so sometimes I just say things, I talk about. I mean, that's my, again, this is the way I did for a long time. I use the equipment that I have the similar way, and I'm still using it the same way, maybe adding a lot more plugins and stuff to that, which is, it's becoming the mastering is becoming more and more like a real serious process. I mean, I'm not talking like the past few years. It's been over maybe 25 years or 30 years, maybe even. But before, mastering was just a transfer to vinyl. It was like, how do you take the mixes from the engineer, put them all back to back, make sure the level of each songs are about the same. Maybe this one's a little bass heavy, so you take a little off. But now it's a whole nother level of artistic decisions. Like, you can really, I sometimes change a lot, and in a good way, I hope. But
yeah, and I definitely want to get into that, because that's my final question for you is because I feel like we're kind of, as a master, at least with me mastering, I'm seeing it more as a part of the creative process, which is super exciting. But before we jump into that, Roger had a question.
Yeah, this is hopefully a quickie. In my travels, I've gotten to understand that recordings of classical music are their own little separate ghetto, and people that do it have very separate reputations from the rest of the engineer community, and they're very fussy about their XY microphone configurations, and it's got its own level of pretentiousness to it. My question is, have either of you ever sort of gotten to understand what role, if any, there is of mastering as it's been applied traditionally in that business? Because it's like so much, oh, we want nothing but the pure sound of the musicians and the room, and it's sort of like it's almost the whole odds are tilted against electricity and engineers and anything like that. It's all supposed to be about the great artists and the great composers and the wonderful room and their great instruments. And I'm just curious if there's any tradition actually in the business where they do mess with it before it goes to record with some sort of mastering process.
Yeah, I think, yeah, my experience with it's all about maintaining the dynamic range, first and foremost, because I feel I got the feedback one time I submitted a track that I wrote and I composed and I mixed and well, I didn't mix it. I had Octavian Studios in Yonkers do the recording and then doing the mixing there. But then I did the mastering myself because I wanted more of a creative process for it. And the feedback I got from the grant application that I submitted, the work sample, that's like, you didn't preserve the dynamic range enough. And I'm like, it's my piece. What are you to tell me that I didn't preserve the dynamic range?
You're not
that was
fundable.
kind of what the ear, I think, in the classical world is trained to hear is the dynamic range is first and foremost. So the bigger the range.
So don't
the
touch it, in
bigger.
other words.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
thanks.
yeah. I mean, there's one thing I just want to add is like there is like music made for audiophile. You know, people who really spend so much money on their system, and some of them can hear, some people, you know, some of them whatever, they just buy stuff. But there is a whole bunch of music that's made for people like that have like amazing system, and you know, then you can hear the difference, and the music is actually you can enjoy. But if you keep too much dynamic, a lot of time you can't hear half of it. And let's say if you want to listen to classical music in the car, forget it. It's not even if you have a Jaguar or a Bentley, it's you know, you really have, it's you're gonna it's gonna disappear. The nuances, they're gonna go. So I think, and I've seen that not too much in classical because I don't do that much classical, but in jazz, I've seen that in a few years passed by, that people want their music to be heard more like pop. And you know, there is a way, like, again, like if you record it, produce it a certain way, and mix it a certain way, master, you don't have to squash everything, but it will sound maybe a little more accessible, and you could play it in the supermarket almost, it'd be okay, you know, like that's the extreme. I think if you can hear in the supermarket, then you're pop, you're fine. But I think it's there is, I think there is like music made for audiophiles, which is, I don't know, that's not my thing. I don't think that way, but I get it, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like the market's definitely, the good news, Roger, is getting smaller. Because I feel like, especially the millennial generation, my generation, and the Gen Z, they're mixing their records, their classical records, more like pop records.
Right.
So they tend to be.
Does classical radio, in your experience, you know, listening in the car or wherever, is there some compression like there
Oh
is?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I did. You know, for a while I was driving at Avatar, and I spent like half an hour each way or something in the car, and I actually made. I wanted to listen to classical pieces that I remember. When I was a kid, I was listening my parents' record, and they had some classical stuff. I had Bilale and Platters, and then I came up with the Rolling Stones and, you know, whatever. So, but I listened to classical. My dad used to listen to classical. I liked it, so I decided to make CDs for the car. That was like 10 years ago or something. And so I got I mastered those records myself, like Beethoven, Mozart, whatever, through my gear, just to have fun. I added a little more bottom that that they had, and I compressed it a little bit more and made it for the car, and it sounded really good. You know, it wasn't like a radio compression, but it was more like it was more enjoyable because I didn't lose like half the music in the soft moments. And I got a little bit more, it was a little more exciting in the bottom because it was more processed. It wasn't maybe as natural that it should be, but it definitely made it sound better to me, because maybe I'm not a purist, but I feel like so there is something to say about like classical music being mastered maybe a little bit. If they were mastered more excitingly, maybe more people will listen to it too, except not just the audio file with the, $40,000 speakers and all that stuff in quiet room. And but radio station is actually the worst, because that compression, really, you can hear it. You can really hear the softer section coming up. But again, if you didn't have those compressor at the end, you probably wouldn't be able to broadcast that type of music at all. I don't think it will be.
It's funny.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. But we accept it because we're used to it. Like, just even pop music, like, doesn't sound always great on the radio. You can hear like things like compressing too much, but we are used to it. And now with Spotify or whatever platform, I think by not using dynamic on the music, it just by lowering it to a certain level and keeping everything intact, it is good. It is good. It makes the music be what it is instead of changing it to fit a format.
One thing that's sort of comical is I have friends that are, quote unquote classical composers, and they've been educated in almost nothing regarding recording, mixing, any of that. But now they try to get their hand in it and use it, and they have no knowledge base to do that with. And one friend in particular, he'll get a recording and he'll go, gee, I don't like the bass in the third, in minutes 3 through 3:33, and he'll want to go in and monkey with the EQ of little sections of the piece, and that ultimately comes out disastrous. It just kills the breathability and the stereo, three-dimensional, two-dimensional image. And then there's other people who will try to apply reverb with no idea of hall versus room versus whatever, and they'll of course create some monstrous horror movie kind of reverb effect on it. So it's strange to watch these worlds collide.
Yeah, what's even more interesting, like from my straddling both the electronic world and classical world, and like when streaming became a thing, and the sound normalization, I'm noticing like the classical music sounds louder, and then the louder music sounds softer, because of the way the normalization is happening now. So sometimes I feel some of the classical music is actually, they're turning it up, now in streaming.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Heidi, you had a question.
Yes, I've been very blessed here in Maine to have, well, not just Maine, but in New York City before, to have spent a month working for the DVD section of Masterdisc, and also have met Bob Ludwig at several things at Berklee College of Music and at audio stuff around town, and also at up here in Maine, we're blessed because Bob Ludwig had his Gateway Mastering here, which I did not see, but I've been very blessed to see Adam Ayen's mastering studio, and his was built from scratch. And I'm wondering, for one question is, what was the difference between moving into what you've got? Did you build it from scratch, and did you lose people like James Lindenschmidt as an engineer for your technology, or did you just move in? And the other thing I'm curious to know about is about the dynamics between the different bands that you've taken on, because it seems like you've had a various different genres, from Iggy Pop to Dave Matthews to White Stripes. It sounds like a lot of different clients that you have to like please to a certain kind of extent, and the different criteria, I guess. And I'm wondering what you have to say about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. as far as the room, do you want to, Adam? Do you want to respond on your end also for the room, your room, if you
Yeah,
have
well,
it from
yeah,
scratch?
with mine, like I said, I'm completely in the box. So the room isn't really, much of a thing for me
Also,
these
you're
days.
doing by headphones.
I'm
You're
doing
doing.
by headphones too, which is
Okay, okay,
kind of
okay.
sacrilege to some people. But I know my I have these open backs, and I kind of know the because I primarily work in electronic music, so I
Right.
kind of know instinctively and kind of just from experience,
Yeah.
experiencing like big club, and just kind of know the technology behind it and kind of know what the end result is. So it's a little different for me. So I know, like with you, Fred, you're doing more acoustic, some acoustic band elements. So kind of a room, sometimes a room is a little bit more advantageous when you're not doing purely electronic music, right?
Right. No,
So,
no, no. Yeah. Yeah, the room, actually, this room, um, I took over a room that was already built and designed by an acoustician, John Brandt. And when I took over, I just did all the finishing part again, because the person took all the person who built that room was designing the exact same room in Connecticut. So when he left, he took all the cloud, all the wood that you can see, and all the visual part he took with him, and then what everything acoustical treatment that are in the walls, the membrane, um, the bass traps and all that stayed. So basically, this room, I'm not gonna say I built it myself. I took over and I reshaped it. I had to move a wall because my speakers are mounted in the soffit mounted in the wall, so it needed more space. So I moved that whole front wall. But other than that, I didn't really build this room from scratch. But it has been built with an acoustician designing, you know, determining the golden, there's a golden rules, like there's a space, the height, the width, the length. So the wall was built to accommodate that, and then everything else falls in places. um it's New York City, Brooklyn in this case. It's always you the best rooms they have to you have to waste a lot of space, basically. And the square footage is so expensive here, so you can't afford to lose, like, 5 feet here, 6 feet here. It's tight, but this room is really nice. It's my favorite room that I had in all these years. So I think anybody who wants to build a mixing room or a mastering room with speakers needs to spend the money in the acoustic of the room and the design of the room before anything else. In your case, Adam, and I see a lot of not a lot, more and more, let's say, engineers that I talk to, mixers, they mix with headphones because you don't have to deal with the room, and you can also do it anywhere. If you have it all in the box, you can do it from hotel rooms, airplanes. Again, like it's illimited almost.
and I will say it's kind of changed for me too. Like I've
Yeah.
used to rent out studio space to
Oh,
do
yeah, yeah,
stuff, and now I don't, because the technology has gotten to so you can tune the headphones using Sonar Works, and
yeah, yeah.
there's the technology what is amazing. What it didn't used to be that even 5 years ago,
Right, right, right.
So
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
it's changing, and I think it's like the newer generation probably will probably catch on that, because it is cheaper. Even if you spend $5,000 on a pair of headphones, it's dirt cheap comparing to, it's not even close. It's like it's the equivalent of a plug-in versus the real deal. It's not even like there's no comparison. So I think for that part, it's gonna take on, because there's no reason why. It's a good system, and it's a lot cheaper. But for me, it's like, this is always how I worked, and I feel comfortable with speakers, and I feel like I don't have to think too much. And also, when I leave this room, I'm not at work anymore. I can't work I have to be here. So it maybe gives me like some kind of distance from workspace. As far as like working with different bands, I don't think I mean, a lot of people do that. I think it's, especially all these bands, that most of the band that I work with, they're mostly, band playing music acoustically or electric, but guitars, and it's not that different. And I think it's a common sense. Once you start mastering and understanding each style of music, then you just make it fit. And I think for me, it will be like, for example, like we were talking about classical before, that would be a little harder if somebody comes in and say, okay, well, I want to do like a classical record. Then I would have to talk and say, what type of, you want to, does it have to be audiophile thing, or do you want a more, so it's you can play it in the car, or in a noisy place, and without losing to. It's really I wouldn't feel that comfortable. But like all the rock stuff, the pop, the jazz, it's really, to me, it's a little bit the same thing. And I think it's almost more understanding the client than, because each music maybe has a style, but then every client wants different things. So it's not that complicated, I think. I mean, to me at least, it feels like it always, like, once you understand the client, you get to the end project fairly easily without thinking too much. I don't know if I was able to answer the question, but it's not like like if I had to change equipment, do all in a box, or that would be complicated, or go to a different studio, forget it. Like, that to me would be impossible. Even the best studio, if you said to go to Bob Ludwig's studio, he's off today. Well, he's not working anymore, but he let you use his room. Just go ahead. It's beautiful room. I wouldn't know where to start. And even with the same equipment, I'll be lost. So I think that's what makes me feel comfortable, is being surrounded by the equipment that I know, the speakers I know, the room I know, and I feel comfortable. And then after that, everything falls in places. I think that's the case for a lot of people,
Okay, my question then
Okay.
is, like in music, when you hear the guitar, you say it's Eric Clapton. If you listen to violin, it's Isaac something. What about when you listen to music? Can you tell by the sound it was mastered by Mr. or Miss blah blah blah?
No.
Oh, there's no.
No,
really?
For me, it's like,
to give it a personality to mastering. That's what I'm.
Well, that if then you can tell. Yes, it's but it wouldn't go to the. I don't think there is, like, the music is so much more important than the mastering. Like, even the mix,
sense.
what I mean? Like, for me, when people tell me like, "Oh, I love what you did on that record. It's the best record. I want the same." I'm like, well, I just help. I put my little 2 cents there. Like, it's not me. I didn't create the music. It's the recording, the mixing, the production. It's all. And then at the end, I'm trying not to screw it up, and maybe add a little percentage here and there to make it better. It's really hard, and it's easy for me to sell. Like, I can tell people, oh yeah, I worked hard on that. When the record came to me, it was already sounding unbelievable, and I just had to not screw it up and make things maybe a little more even, song to song, or as opposed as some project where I really work my ass off on the thing, make it sound 10 times better, but it's still not that great. I wouldn't be proud of saying, oh yeah, you want to hear something I did here. But if you compare A to B before and after, you'll be like, wow, that's much better. Fred worked a lot on that to make it happen. So I think, when you hear something that sounds great, you don't know where it comes from. You really can't tell.
In the 80s, it was sort of production central, and there were a couple of producers who had characteristic sounds across a number of records. So you had Daniel Lanois,
right?
You might have had Bruce Fairbairn,
yeah.
And so you can hear different records that they produce for different artists that you can definitely hear the similarity.
Right.
But even those guys, they didn't keep that up forever. They had a streak and
as a producer, you have way you shape the sound and the music a lot more. Mastering engineer, I mean, as I said, sometimes I do a lot. I put, I step all over the thing, and it's because it needed to be. But a lot of time when it's a good sounding project at the end, it's coming like that. It's coming good. You have to just make sure that you tweak things, and I feel like, yeah, I mean, a guitar player, you can tell if you're a guitarist, or drummer, like stuff like that. If you're but for me, as a mastering engineer, it's hard for me to tell another mastering engineer, especially nowadays. I guess, everybody uses the same tools, especially at the end, the chain. When you listen to a rock band, they all sound the same. I mean, all the guitars sound. You can't tell from a guitar player to another one. It's even a vocalist. They're
That's just plain cold, Fred. But I'll shut up for now. As a guitar player, but I said that's just plain cold. But I'll leave it alone for now.
So it means then we can expect you getting a Grammy, right? Fred and Adam.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
unfortunately, you can't get a Grammy, right, for your good work.
You can. Yeah.
You can?
Yeah. I got
they
two.
have mastering.
Yeah, I got two. I got
that's
lucky.
good.
I got lucky. I worked with a Spanish artist who was nominated. He had 7 the first time, and no, he was nominated for 7, and he got 5, and the second time he was nominated for 9, and he got 7 out of it. It was, and as a mastering engineer, you get only you get the statue, with the gramophone. You get it when you have record of the year or you have album of the year. That's the only two, and then maybe engineer, best engineering or best engineer. Yeah, there's one.
Best engineer. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But record of the year and album of the year, the mastering engineer takes the Grammy as well.
Okay, good. Yeah. So it's important to be then the mastering engineer. Very good.
Yeah. It's I feel like it doesn't change your life to have the 2 things or the 3 or whatever, how many Grammys people get, but I feel like it established something at the end. When people come in the room and they see the equipment, they see the thing, they feel comfortable, they feel like, okay, it's legit, it's but it's not gonna change. Like, I don't think because you have a Grammy or something, it's going to change. People are going to be off the hook calling you for mastering. I don't think. I mean, it didn't happen for me, for sure. It's just good to have, just like records, like the White Stripes, always help for years. People mention that record, the Nationals, the there's a few records like that people like, and I happened to master them, and I got lucky to be part of it. And there's other records I would like to do I never done. So
good. I think any more questions? If not, we can round it up with Adam's outro.
Yeah, well, thanks, Fred, for joining this and leading this discussion, and thanks, Sohrab, for producing this event. And
Thank you.
For MFM, for those of you that don't know, we're a non-profit advocacy organization that advocates for the making music as a profession and fair. We also 501c6, so we do lobby and we do activism with musicians' rights and a lot of the activities that go on in lobbying for fair pay for musicians. So we also produce these webinars periodically, and we have lots of educational resources on our website that are available to members, and also the networking component. I'm on the board. I'm the vice president of MFM. And so I invite everybody, if you're not a member, to go to our website at musiciansformusicians.org and sign up. And your support helps us do what we do and continue our mission and serve the community at large. So thanks again for everybody joining. And Sohrab, do you have final?
Yeah, just for the next productions I have in mind. I'm working now on a shakuhachi talk event or webinar event, because you guys, I've my third home country is Japan, and I love the shakuhachi, and I found somebody who really could speak about it. And then Persian classical music, hopefully by Kaveh Hartalab, who's an MFM member. He's promised me that for a year now. I want him to speak about Persian classical music, and the African themes like Fela Kuti Part 2 is still in the works. And also with banning, we still try to get Thomas Mapfumo also on a talk panel. So things are happening, and hopefully of interest.
And MFM turns 10 this year, and
yes.
we're
The
board. We're working on a special event, a live music event, live in person, later this year in the fall. So stay tuned to that. We'll have some headlining guest artists from our membership, and so yeah, it'll be a really good kind of like a showcase and / networking event. So stay tuned for that as well.
Thank you.
Cool. Well,
David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Richard, good to see you again. Thanks, Heidi. Say hello to Maine. Dawood, thank you. Peter, thank you. Christopher, sleeping, and Marxie is in the studio rehearsing. Okay, see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Love you. Thank you.
Thank
Adam,
you
you
very
too.
much. Bye.
Bye-bye.